Hello my fellow art nerds, and welcome back to another Not Quite Speed Paint. Today I'll be redrawing a panel from one of my favorite mangas, Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist is probably my all-time favorite manga for its phenomenal story and lovable three-dimensional characters, which are two things that I look for the most when it comes to any kind of story. But I don't want to keep you here for too long, so let's get arting. To start off, especially when doing a study or a redraw, I kept my canvas completely zoomed out and sketched in only the largest forms first to really lay down the shapes that I needed. Focusing on large details first and not worrying about minute details straight from the beginning allows you to focus on the bigger picture first. Where does this go? Where does that go? How does the composition look as a whole? Etc, etc, etc. This doesn't only go for redraws, this goes for every art piece. Yes, it's good to have detail, but more likely than not, 99% of the people that look at your work will glance at it briefly and then look at the whole thing. There's a very small chance that someone will actually stare at it for a good long while and zoom into it. Focusing more on the big picture is what's truly important, because it's what the vast majority of the audience is looking at anyway. It'll also save you a lot of time and energy, and it will quicken your workflow. The footage that you're looking at right now was actually recorded live from two of my classes, where manga panel redraws were the lesson that I taught. This particular one is from Cartooning and Anime 2, but I did teach this 2 other times. It was 2-part lessons, so I drew the sketch for one class and lined and shaded the rest for the next class. Each of our classes are approximately an hour and a half long, so in total this whole redraw took me about 3-ish hours, I'd say. If you'll believe it, this was the easiest panel I chose to do because I taught this lesson 3 times. This was for the easier Cartooning and Anime, so this is Cartooning and Anime 2. The other 2 were for Cartooning and Anime 3. The other 2 times were for older students, and I chose panels from the manga One Punch Man. I wasn't even able to finish those in the 3 hours because they were intensely difficult. But like I told my students, they didn't have to choose anything nearly as tricky as these. I just like to give myself intense challenges. The students that know me a little bit better, it's like a running joke. It's like if I'm doing anything that I can teach them with, then I'm probably going to choose the hardest option, just because I think it's more fun. But I always tell them, like, you don't have to do this. It's not that. It's just me. It's just me being me. Another thing that I told my students was that what we were doing in class was something called a study. A lot of professional artists do it, either with photos or other pieces by master artists, where they'll essentially copy what they see in order to learn. The difference between copying outright and doing a study is that studies are purely for learning purposes, nothing else. When you study a photo, more likely than not, you're studying lighting or materials or proportions or something realism-based in nature, because photos can't be wrong. If you're looking at a photo of a teacup, say, in light, I've seen that studied a couple times, then you're looking at an actual photo of how water behaves or liquid behaves under the light, so obviously it's going to be 100% accurate. Studying off of that will give you the best results. When you're studying another artist's work, you're most likely studying their techniques or their compositions. This is where master studies come into play, where an artist will copy a work by a master artist to learn from their techniques. More often than not, these are done with historical artists, but in this case we're taking modern master artists and learning from their techniques. When it comes to lining like a manga artist, more often than not their lines are quite thin and clean and very detailed, so keeping that in mind while I lined, I had my smoothing set super high. It's called smoothing in Photoshop. In other programs it's called other things, so in Medibang I know it's called correction, in Clip Studio Paint I think it's called stabilization. All that really does is it lags your brush behind just a little bit so it smooths out all of your handshake and whatnot. The higher it goes, the higher it smooths out, but the higher it goes, the harder it is also to control. So it takes a bit of time to get used to. For my own line work, a lot of the time I like to keep my lines pretty thick, but also super clean, so the cleanliness wasn't really an issue on my end. It was mostly the thin nature of the line work that threw me for a loop. Even during the lining phase, I'm still constantly referring back and forth to the panel reference to make sure that I'm getting positioning as close as I can to the original. When it comes to the final product, you'll see that it wasn't perfect, but it was as close as I could get it with the time allotted. While sketching this and later lining it, I also disregarded a lot of the details with the exploded robotic arm, solely for the purpose of time. If I was doing this whole thing on my own, more likely than not I'd be doing every single little piece of machinery that you could see in there, but I did have to keep the sketch and the lines to an hour and a half each, and with this one I was determined to finish it within that amount of time. There was no way that I was gonna leave all 3 of the demos for this week unfinished. Okay, I had to finish at least one. This kind of brings me to my next point that eventually a lot of artists have to learn. Good enough is better than perfect. good enough is better than perfect. And I don't mean that you should slack off on all of your work and go, it's good enough, and pass it off that way. No, I mean that you should work as hard as you can, but don't let it take you over. At one point, after you work on something for ages, you gotta say, this is the best I can do, and if I work on it any longer, I'm just gonna be wasting time and I'm gonna drive myself insane for no necessary reason. Especially for perfectionists, this is a hard ideal to get let go of, but especially if you're working in a business where speed is super necessary, it's vital that you learn to let it go. And with that, that's the manga panel redraw complete! This was definitely one of my favorite lessons to teach, solely because I really got to challenge myself when it came to studying these panels. I don't really do studies in my free time, so this is a good learning experience. If you liked what you saw, make sure to leave a like on this video, comment down below to tell me what you'd like to see me draw next, and hit subscribe so that you never miss an upload. Join our little art community with the links down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!